Hello everyone, I've got some more strong non-meta teams for you all to play around with and spice up your gameplay. For those new to my channel, I actually have another video on the same topic which you can watch for more teams, but anyways, let's cut right into the teams I have for you today. The first being a Neuvillette team. We're not done talking about him just yet. This team is specifically a vape hypercarry team. See, after pulling him and testing him for a while, I found Neuvillette's taser hypercarry team to be his best, and as great as this team is, of which it is very great, my only complaint with this team is that taser doesn't deal a whole lot of damage. Sure, it does increase Neuvillette's personal damage, but not as much as other reactions would, which you'd commonly perform for other Hydra DPSs, such as vape for instance. So to fix this, I've replaced Fischl with Xiangling. Crazy, I know. But in truth, though this looks like a simple change, it took a fair bit of optimization for this team to work. I actually tried to make this type of team work when I was first testing Neuvillette teams, but I couldn't get it to work. It actually performed worse than the aforementioned taser team, but now that I've got it to work, it's actually becoming one of my favorite teams and probably my most favorite team to play Neuvillette in. Naturally, with vape and because of Xiangling, Neuvillette deals very high damage. When it comes to his vape hits, Neuvillette can hit at least 70,000 to upwards of 120,000. Of his hits that don't vape, they're still high and fairly close to the taser team, standing at around 35,000. I'll get into the optimizations needed for this team to work, but first, let's get into the rotation of this team. When playing this team, as usual, I'll start off with both of Neuvillette's abilities. After that, tap Kazuha's skill. Now hold Xiangling's skill and be sure to pick up a Hydro Crystallized Shield. Next, use Xiangling's burst and skill. Immediately after, use Kazuha's burst to swirl Pyro. This will allow for Neuvillette to reliably perform vape, which, speaking of, now charge attack thrice with Neuvillette. Also, be sure to be close to enemies so that Xiangling's burst can actually hit them. Now when it comes to the changes I've made for this team to work, the first has to do with Xiangling. In this team, Xiangling is a support and an amazing support at that. In this team, he's the literal backbone for the performance and success of this team. Here, Xiangling is in his shield build, using the Favoni slants to battery others with triple HP and most importantly, using 4 Archaic Petra. I don't know about you guys, but I legitimately forgot this set existed, yet it's so good. It basically turns Xiangling into a second Kazuha, since for Neuvillette, he'll shred the Hydro res of enemies with the shield, while giving him a big 35% increase in Hydro damage when you pick up a Hydro Crystallized Shield. In common vape teams, either Neuvillette will either receive no buff since you'll be pairing him with Benny, or he'll receive a decent buff because of Xiangling's shield. But in this specific build, Neuvillette gains huge buffs, which really make a big difference in his damage. Lastly, for Xiangling, the only change I made to her is that I greatly increased her energy, since she doesn't have Bennett to battery her, and she's really only relying on Xiangling or Kazuha to get her energy. She's gonna need a lot of energy to get her burst back reliably. I've been using around 250% energy, and it's worked well for me, so I'd recommend to be within this range, but more is better. Now for the next team, it has to do with many players' favorite animal unit, myself included, Kazuha. Kazuha is usually played as a buffer, but in this team he's much more than that. He's a sort of sub DPS or enabler. The team I'm talking about is Burgeon Kazuha. Often animal units aren't used in Dendro teams since they have trouble swirling the right elements because of Dendro, so they perform quite badly. But in this Dendro team, Kazuha really shines. How this team works is that instead of having a Pyro unit trigger Burgeon, such as Thoma for instance, Kazuha will perform Burgeon while swirling Pyro from Benny's burst. This may sound odd, but it works really well since you'll be building EM on Kazuha anyways, so his core damage will be high, and his swirls aren't very frequent. So just as Thoma has a downtime in his Pyro application to where you're able to produce a good amount of cores, Kazuha's burst does the same. For this type of team, there's actually 2 ways to play it. You can either have a Hydra DPS with a passive Dendro applier, or the other way around. For simplicity, I'll talk about the first version, but I will mention things that pertain to both type of teams. Before that though, let's get into the rotation of this team. The beginning of the rotation I use does differ a bit from how Burgeon Kazuha is commonly played. What I'll do is I'll actually swirl Hydro with Kazuha to increase Ayato's damage. But after testing my rotation and the commonly used rotation, I really can't tell a difference between the two, but feel free to use whichever rotation you prefer. You can skip the first 3 steps I'll mention if you're using the common rotation, or you can go with them as I do. Anyhow, I begin by first using Nahida's Burst. This will increase the amount of damage bonus Kazuha will give to Ayato, while increasing the damage of his burst. Then I use Ayato's burst and then Kazuha's skill. Right after, I use Nahida's skill and then Benny's skill and burst, and immediately after Kazuha's burst. At this point, simply use Ayato's skill to deal damage and produce cores. Once his skill is complete, repeat from the top. To gear Kazuha for this team, you have 2 ways to build him. Artifact wise, you can either build him with 4 Viridescent, which will increase his swirl damage and the damage buff he'll give to his team. Or you can prioritize his burgeon damage by giving him 4 Lost Paradise, 4 Gilded, or 2 sets with 80 EM. If you're playing the Ayato variation, or will be using the rotation I showed, it's best if you use 4 Viridescent. On the other hand, if you're using the variation with a Dendro DPS, then use any of the bottom row of artifacts. Also, be sure to have one of your teammates use 4 Deepwood. Now for weapons, Kazuha will be using his traditional EM or ER weapons, so there's nothing you need to go out of your way and change when it comes to this. Speaking of energy, try to have around 185%. His burst is very important, so make sure to hit an energy number close to this. The third team I'll be sharing is honestly one of my favorite teams to play. It incorporates something many teams don't, which may feel odd at first but is really fun. This team is a special take on Tighnari's Aggravate team. In this team, instead of playing Fischl, I play Raiden, and I do this for 2 reasons. First is the battery AI Miko. Though Fischl is a good battery, I found that she doesn't battery Miko completely simply because Miko's energy requirements are so high. So Raiden solves this. The second and main reason is Raiden fills the gap of Tighnari's cooldowns. See, Tighnari has this odd feature where though he's the main DPS, he does not spend much time on the field. Despite being a DPS, he just performs his 3 charge attacks and his burst, which honestly lasts for like 5 seconds. And then you switch to another character while you wait for his cooldowns. In his common Aggravate team, you'd switch to either Nahida or Miko, but this feels pretty awkward. To fix this, I've included Raiden, who herself does not have a very long field time. So within this team, there's actually 2 DPSs, Tighnari and Raiden. This may sound odd, but believe me, it works really well. This team is really good since everyone here is a big hitter. Miko deals tons of damage with her burst, as does Raiden, then there's Tighnari, and of course Nahida with her skill, on top of the Aggravate reaction. And with Raiden's inclusion, you're able to get bursts back faster and continuously output damage. But beyond damage, this team is really fun. I'd say it's more exciting and action-packed for a lack of better term, because this team has 2 DPSs and the constant uses of bursts. The rotation of this team goes in this order. Start with Nahida's skill and burst. Then Raiden's skill right after. Next, use all of Miko's skill, use her burst, and then quickly use her skills again. Now use Tighnari's skill and fire 3 charge attacks. Once the third is fired, cast his burst. Last but not least, use Raiden's burst, but if Nahida's burst is ready, be sure to use it so Raiden can deal extra damage. Once Raiden's burst is done, cast her skill again and repeat. For builds, there's nothing to note here. There's no change to anyone's builds, so you can use them as they usually are. Well everyone, these are all the teams I have for you today. I hope you try these teams out, and if you do, please let me know what you think of them. Also, if you have any strong non-meta teams you play, feel free to share them with me in the comments. And with that, I'm gonna end the video. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you all for watching, take care, and thank you for watching once again.